The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. Welcome to Pediatric Perspectives, where we are looking at children's health challenges from a different perspective, one that includes critical thinking, one that's not afraid to give you the honest truth. We've got Polly back today so that she can pick my brain one more time. Thank you, Polly, for taking over the show. I love it when you get to challenge me.
CHD sues the AAP, and you're heavily involved, I hear. Tell us about it and why. I think it's really important we hear from you.
Yeah. So I am named in this lawsuit along with Dr. Ken Stoller. We are alleging, and Rick Jaffe and the CDC have joined forces, legal teams, and we are alleging that the AAP violated the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO, by making false and fraudulent claims about the safety of the Center for Disease and Control's childhood immunization schedule. And they're doing this all the while receiving massive funding from the vaccine manufacturers and providing financial incentives for pediatricians who achieve high vaccination rates. Let me tell you, I know very well about all of these things because I was targeted by, doctors are given your license to practice medicine by medical boards, and those are state by state. But there was no question in my mind that there was an orchestrated attempt to shut down my practice, get me unlicensed because, well, how it all played out, some of you have heard this story, but in a nutshell, I wrote the vaccine-friendly plan. The board started coming after me. I was exposing some of the harms of vaccines. They said, prove that the vaccine-friendly plan is as safe as the CDC schedule. We published that data, the largest study of vaxxed, unvaxxed in a practice in the USA. And what it showed was shocking, I think, and it scared the establishment because we found that the unvaccinated kids were hands down healthier by massive margins in areas like neurodevelopmental, autism, ADD, ADHD, anxiety, depression, developmental milestones, learning disabilities, but also allergies and autoimmunity, asthma and eczema. And get this, the unvaxxed rarely got sick. And when they did get sick, they were much less sick, less severely ill, and got better quickly. All of this led them to take my license. Bam, it was gone. I was a threat to public health. And the AAP followed with removing my board certification, which I'd been a board certified pediatrician for 30 years. They did the same for Ken Stoller. He's also named, we were the two physicians named in this lawsuit for having our professional reputations destroyed, our ability to practice medicine removed. But even more important than us losing our careers, we're naming in this lawsuit the Nelson's 1-year-old daughter died at the 1-year shots, cardiac arrest after having seizures 12 hours after being given 6 catch-up shots. But these were actually 12 different vaccines in those 6 shots. And I think if you're a parent and you're thinking about vaccines and maybe you're thinking, I just want to go slow. I have a son, he's got a 2-year-old, and he knows about vaccine injury because it happened to him and it happened in our family. And I was encouraging him, just hold off if you can, right? I mean, this is what I would do if it was my kid. I'm not giving medical advice here. I'm just talking about what I would do. He came back from his 6-month well visit with his son, and he was so excited. He said, "You'll be so proud of me, Dad. I only got 1 shot." I said, "Oh no, which one?" "Oh, I don't know." Turns out he had gotten the Pentasil, which was 5 vaccines in 1 needle. One of the most dangerous ones on the childhood schedule for infancy. There's another set of twins, the Shaw's kids, who they both died last year. I think it was 8 days after getting their 18-month visits. I coach, my partner Dee Hoover and I, we coach families who have lost infants to SIDS multiple times a year. I mean, this is happening probably 2,000-3,000 times a year in the US. A baby is given a vaccine and within a week they're dead. And it's not a coincidence. It's a clear association. And that's what turns association into causation. This is always this big argument. And bottom line is you can know something is causative. Like if you take penicillin, you get hives, it's a rash from the penicillin. Well, if you take vaccines and your baby dies, your baby died from the vaccines almost certainly. And here's why we know this. There are multiple studies that show this. Most of the deaths are happening in the first 7 to 10 days after vaccines. They're not happening before vaccines. And we now understand the mechanisms by which babies are dying. And we have multiple studies reproducing the same findings. So those are the criteria needed to know that. So the importance of this lawsuit, folks, is that we are now exposing this massive fraud that's been happening for the last 2, 3 decades that's keeping even pediatricians completely in the dark. They are not aware the level to which this fraud is occurring. It's affecting medical journals. It affects your ability to publish studies. And those of us who are, I don't know, I don't like to call myself brave because I think I was just doing what I should do. But you try to publish something, they're going to target you. And they're going to probably get that publication rejected or retracted, which is what happens.
So who's targeting you? You're talking about the AAP are targeting you.
The AAP is certainly involved in targeting. I mean, I got nasty stuff online and social media from people from the AAP calling for me to lose my board certification long before they took my license. But it's the medical boards that actually will discipline physicians to maintain this sort of myth that it's dangerous not to vaccinate, for example. But the foundational fraud of the AAP, it goes deep. I mean, they substitute this. If you have antibodies against something, that means you're immune. Immunity, natural immunity, comes from having acquired the infection naturally, and you develop 2 layers of protection: local at the mucous membrane level and antibodies. And then they just keep protecting the fraud by blocking studies, like the study I did. Many others have been blocked and retracted. Wakefield was one of the original. They exaggerate the risks, and they suppress studies that show harm. We see this over and over again. It's basically the vaccine process is a racket. They create the condition by vaccinating, then they sell the treatments, so you keep people sick for life. And that was some of the things that the vax-unvax studies are finding, my own and several others, is the more you vaccinate, the more you have chronic illness. Chronic illness is cha-ching for pharma. It's ongoing income for the rest of that person's life. And pediatricians are trapped in this because of the massive financial incentives. I know, Paula, you and I have talked about that in the past. And the pediatric community and the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, established the Red Book, which is like their Bible on infectious disease. And all pediatricians, I mean, I used to do it too. I would refer to the Red Book. What do they say I should do for this, that, or the other? I mean, there's good information in there, yes, but there's a lot of misinformation as well. And you know, that massive book does not have a single reference. Isn't that interesting?
Interesting. And also AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, in case people don't know what that is, they're funded by the dark side. They're basically an arm of Big Pharma.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And they've been a large part of the perpetuating the myth that it was vaccines that eradicated these diseases. And, you know, books like Dissolving Illusions is brilliant at illustrating how in every disease for which we have a vaccine, most of the decreased mortality was already occurred before the vaccine entered the market. But the AAP and pediatricians in general tend to categorize and give credit to the vaccines as having caused this massive decrease in mortality. I think I was reading one journal article where the analysis was done, and vaccines can only really be given about 3% of the reduction. So 97% of the reduction in mortality from infectious disease came from things like hygiene, flush toilet, good nutrition, refrigeration, things that have nothing to do with the vaccines. So when you add to it the massive harm caused by vaccines, the AAP is really responsible because of their fraudulent activities and their racketeering, continuing to make false claims and continuing to suppress our ability for doctors to get to the bottom of this. They need to be held accountable. This is like tobacco science on steroids. You know, they publish study after study using either totally fraudulent data, or they design the study to show what they want it to show.
What I really hate about this whole situation is it's become so political. So 19 Democratic states, 19 have decided they're not going to follow the CDC's recommendations. They're going to follow AAP. So kids will die. They will die because the AAP schedule does harm. No doubt about it. CDC schedule is not great. We all know that. That's also going to cause catastrophic devastation as well. But it's
Yeah.
better than the AAP. But what this whole thing is, people aren't even thinking, I'm not going to follow that because I don't support Trump or I don't whatever. And this is the problem. People are putting politics and money over children's lives.
Yeah, Paul, you're so right. It is tragic that thinking, intelligent people are making decisions in a political way over something as simple as, how should I raise my kid? How should I feed my kid? How should I vaccinate or not vaccinate my kid? All those decisions should be based on good science, not junk tobacco science, which is what unfortunately we've been forced to rely on. So you want really good science. It's starting to come out and it's being opposed every which way when you have great science being done. So no, absolutely. It's time. Parents, the parents, we have to take charge of our own kids' lives and what is put into their bodies. And no matter what, make sure it's your decision. And if you're feeling pressure from a doctor, you need to fire that doctor. I was talking with a doctor just recently, and apparently this is a real thing. Pediatricians are starting to mumble that they're not going to survive because of all the people that are leaving their practices because they won't follow the full old CDC schedule, right? So, yes, leave those practices, those 67,000 American Academy of Pediatrics pediatricians need to say goodbye to the AAP for what they are: racketeering, fraudulent, pharma-driven, profiteering, illegal operations.
I hear also Albert Bourla, the Pfizer CEO or whatever, he was crying his eyes out at the World Economic Forum because no one's buying his vaccines anymore. So, yeah, it's a very sad situation for these people, but it is what it
Yeah.
is.
Well, hopefully we can put some of these people in jail.
What would you like to see personally? What would you like to see the outcome from this?
Well, the most important outcome is that we remove mandates altogether. We have to acknowledge that none of the vaccines on the childhood schedule were properly tested for safety. So none had proper placebos, none had looking at all health outcomes, none were long enough to detect most of the poor health outcomes that were happening. So, I mean, we have to start from scratch. And I'm not against the concept of vaccines, but I'm against the fact that we don't have a single vaccine that measures up when you look at risk benefit analysis. In every single case, the vaccine is far more dangerous than not doing the vaccine. And so, these lies that have been promoted by the AAP and the CDC in the past, they try to equate antibody production to immunity. It's not. Antibodies are just a tiny bit of your immune system. They don't acknowledge the use of fake placebos or not using placebos at all. And, declaring that you have to have a vaccine to have immunity, that's a lie. Offit wrote, and it's been quoted by the AAP hundreds or thousands of times, that you can take 10,000 vaccines at once. That's insanity. Everybody knows the poison is in the dose. I mean, there's poisons in every single vaccine. How on earth could you give more than even one or two? But 10,000, come on. So that's the insanity of the misinformation that comes out of the AAP and their people. So yeah, we cannot rely on the false declarations that vaccines are safe. Some of them are somewhat effective, but none of them are safe. Not a single one. And the mRNA technology needs to be banned, period. Pharma's embracing it because they can quickly make millions, if not a billion vaccines using mRNA platform, but they're not safe. In fact, they're quite dangerous. So we have criminal corporations doing their own studies and being promoted by the AAP. It's a mess, and it's up to us. Polly, thank you for all the work you're doing at CHD TV and at CHD. Folks, if you ever want to research something, go to the online journal, The Defender, and just put in what you want to research. And they are writing masterpieces on all these topics that we've been covering here.
Yeah, no, Defender are an amazing team I mean, they fact check everything so thoroughly. That's why we've never been sued. What about you? And I mean, remind people just briefly how you actually lost your license.
Well, the Oregon Medical Board was after me. They wanted to shut me down. They wanted to take my license because I was exposing the truth that vaccines are dangerous and that the unvaccinated kids are much healthier. They asked me to prove it after I wrote the Vaccine Friendly Plan book in 2016. And in 2019, published in 2020, we got the data of every patient born into my practice, and we looked at all health outcomes. We published it in the International Journal of Public Health, and within a few days, they took my license. Emergency meeting, I was a threat to public health. So it was strictly retaliatory. What they did was illegal. I was able to get my license back for a bit, but they were relentless. They hired a second investigator. No patient complaints, by the way, which is the only reason a board should investigate a physician is if there's a complaint. But this was absolutely targeting. I mean, they had two full-time investigators on my case. Anything I posted on YouTube, I'd get a letter from the board. Explain this. They were phishing. So that was the reality of how that happened. I got it back. In the end, I turned it back in and said, you can have it. I want to be free. I wanted to be free to talk.
Yeah.
It's like, who can you listen to? Who can you trust? If somebody is on the take from the industry, which, my practice was taking insurance because I'm trying to reach as many people as possible. I could have done a micro practice and had a few hundred patients, and I would have made out like a bandit because I had so many to draw from. But then what happens to those other 10, 15,000 patients who are abandoned? So that was the model I had, and therefore they knew what I was doing. So insurance companies have the right by contract to come in and audit your charts. So they knew the extent to which my practice was not vaccinating, and that the numbers of unvaccinated kids were growing exponentially because I was allowing parents to make their own decisions. And Polly, frankly, that's what put me in a position to be able to see what most pediatricians cannot see. You see, they kick you out of the practice if you won't follow the CDC schedule. So they have no patients in their practice who don't vaccinate. So they just assume that those people are sickly, and they don't realize, as I was able to see with my own eyes in my own practice with my own patients, how incredibly healthy the unvaccinated are. I'm here to share that word and share that message. We have to wake up, parents. It is on us until this system gets totally reworked. It is on us to protect our kids.
We hear Bobby, Secretary Kennedy, is going after the incentives for pediatricians, and thank God. Well,
Yes.
he's hearing. You were the first person to expose that. You really went out there and exposed that. You were on the bus and you exposed it, and from that it went crazy. When I was up at doing the Ron Johnson hearing, we talked about you as well and how you did that brilliant video, and various other things we can't talk about are happening from that. But now I'm seeing it, and Texas Attorney General is going after that as well. So we are moving. Now, here's my question to you. If they say, okay, you can't get financial incentives for vaccinating kids anymore, what is going to happen to these pediatricians? Do they not earn enough money? Is it the lowest paid job in the world? What's the deal?
Yes, pediatricians are at the bottom of the barrel for physician compensation. If you had a really busy practice like I had, you could still make money, decent money, no doubt about it. But for most pediatricians, my guess is they're going to struggle because at least half of your income is tied around vaccines in one way or another. And here's why. You have these multiple well child visits. I mean, there's a well child visit at the hospital. There's a well child visit a few days later. There's a well child visit at 2 weeks, 2 months, 4 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, 15 months, 18 months. That's 10 well child visits by 18 months. For each of those well child visits, you're getting compensated for the visit, which is usually in the range of $250 to $350, $250 to $350. Multiply that by however many new babies you've got, times 10 visits in those first 2 years. That's just thank you for coming in to see us so we can tell you your baby's looking great, right? Measure, weigh, here's normal developmental milestones. But no, those visits are that frequent because there are vaccines they want given at each of those visits. I'd say 9 of those 10 visits are vaccine visits. And the money for vaccines that you and I covered, Polly, and I wrote this up in a published paper that has not been retracted, is on average, now every contract's different, but on average for your first antigen, $40. Every subsequent antigen, $20. At the 2-month and the 6-month visit, you are getting 10 vaccines, 10 antigens. That's over $200 per kid. It ended up being I was losing over $1 million in my practice. We were only billing out $3 million. Overhead in pediatrics runs about 70-80%. So you have to have advice nurses, you have to have receptionists and billing people. It's a massive operation to do a standard insurance-based pediatric practice. So they will struggle and they will come out of it if they're willing to do the right thing. because parents are waking up, and this is where we, the parents, will drive what happens in the future. It's not coming top down. I mean, thank God Bobby's in there doing everything he can, and he's moving the needle. He's making some really good strides. But that could all be undone if administration changes and the old system comes back. We have to make enough change that there's no undoing it. And that's up to us, the parents, and we need to inform people. And that's where some of these lawsuits, I think, might make a difference, because we might, like tobacco, finally getting exposed for what it really was. I think we can expose the vaccine industry in the same way.
I mean, here's the thing. I never thought I'd say this, but we do need pediatricians. I mean, I know I've been saying for years, stay away from pediatricians, and I mean that. Stay away from them, because if your child's not sick, why the hell are you going to them? But if your child is sick, it is, I mean, proper sick, so it's got a lump or something, and you need to go and sit with a pediatrician and say, is this normal? Is this okay? So therefore, if we take away the incentives and say, you're not going to get a cent for vaccinating these kids, but we're going to give you a pay rise. Why don't pediatricians why don't we advocate for them to get a pay rise? They get paid nicely for what they do, no vaccinations, sit there and talk nicely with the mother, and tell her what's wrong with their child, if anything, and stop prescribing so many antibiotics for every single sniffle.
Yes, it's going to require an absolute retraining of the pediatric workforce. And change is difficult, right? It's hard to change what you've always known and always done. I remember as I started making my own changes early 2000s, I felt so inadequate. Like, for example, I knew probiotics were a good thing to heal the gut and get the damage done by the antibiotics, for example, try to reverse and minimize that damage. So the patient would say, well, which one should I take, doctor? I go into the store, and there's hundreds. And like, I didn't know. So we have to re-educate ourselves. And that's a whole nother journey that, I don't know if I have the bandwidth this lifetime, but maybe I'll come back and do that next.
No, and I mean, because again, we got to like have a solution. We can't. I feel like a lot of the work I do is that we're criticizing, which is right. We've got to pull people up because there's so much wrong. But there's got to be solutions as well. Like, we now know good food, organic food, breast milk, and all that kind of stuff. So when I was having children, the nurses were going around telling us there's better nutrition and formula feed than there was in breast milk. I mean, each generation has its issues. But we've got to get to a stage where they just leave these mothers and babies alone. Let them do what's supposed to come naturally.
Absolutely. No, I think pediatricians can survive, but they're going to have to really, they're going to have to get better at what they're supposed to be doing and not follow blindly a system that's broken.
Yeah, well, I was talking to a young mum the other day, and she said she does not go to a pediatrician because she's afraid. I think she's in Virginia or somewhere where it's very scary. But she does go to a pediatric chiropractor, and she feels safe under that situation right now. I don't know. I don't know what the right solution is. Thank God I've had my children, have grown up, and we barely got through it. But yeah, it's difficult for a young mum today navigating with, like you were saying, not just vaccines. You've got to deal with the food, which is for sure poison. We're getting poison from the sky. We're getting poisons in our household products. I mean, it just goes on and on and on and on. It's very hard.
No, it is. And I remember when I was first trying to figure this out, and I'd go to some Defeat Autism Now conferences, and now the MAPS conferences are incredible for providers. There was so much to learn. It was like overwhelming how much there is to learn. And I would think, oh, that's overboard. So I'd have these parents of autistic kids that were looking at all the products in their home and everything they were feeding that kid, and gluten-free, dairy-free, soy-free, corn-free, egg-free, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of excessive. But here's the thing. Maybe 30, 40 years ago, that wouldn't have been necessary. In fact, we know it wasn't necessary. The world wasn't as toxic as it is today. Our world is so toxic today, like you were just pointing out, Polly, in the food, in the water, in the air, in the products people are using, that even if you don't vaccinate, there's a toxic burden that might be enough to tip your kid over into severe chronic health problems. Because it's true. There are unvaccinated, severely autistic kids. There are unvaccinated kids who have autoimmune and immune issues. Why? How could that be? I thought it was just the vaccine. Vaccines, in my mind, are absolutely the most devastating harm that you could find anywhere. But it's such a toxic world that as parents, you can't just rely on, okay, I'm just not going to vaccinate, I'll be fine. No, you absolutely need to pay attention to food, to water, to the air, to the products, as you mentioned before. Watch out for screen time. It is a stress and a poison, and our kids need to be playing in the dirt, playing with blocks, playing outside, off of screens. And there are a few supplements you may want to consider. Everybody needs extra vitamin D with K2. If you're sick, you probably need to boost, glutathione with NAC and take vitamin C. And certain illnesses, you need extra vitamin A for a few days. But hook up with somebody that's already well along their way in figuring out how we can still raise a healthy and happy and robust child in today's world.
I just want to say one thing before we conclude. Whenever I do a show with you and our clipper clips it out on social media, we get more trolls and abuse, you and I together, than any other guest or subject. And now, what is that about? It's unbelievable that they come out en masse.
Yeah. So Andy Wakefield was the tip of the spear when it comes to eliciting trolls, right? He was one of the first. I mean, gosh, he wrote that seminal paper on MMR and autism being a possible link in 1998. That's almost 30 years ago. And here we are still. We've barely moved the needle in the direction that it needed to be moving, but we're finally making some headway. I'm used to it because I've been on YouTube for 10 years. And I mean, I had to take all my vaccine information off of my platform. They were going to shut it down. Yeah, there's so much trolling. We used to say that having Andy involved with anything was like nuclear. You were going to destroy whatever it is you were trying to do. And so I've become slightly nuclear, but
I have, because I have Andy on the show and he doesn't get the same amount of attack you do. It's quite unbelievable, especially over on X. I think they all get an email. Dr. Thomas is back on. Quick, get over there now. Because they all come together and all saying the same things. But well, congratulations. You're obviously a threat.
Well, I don't know if I want to be congratulated for that, but I do. It is reassuring that you must be on to something, right? When the establishment that's corrupt tries to take you down and silence you, you've hit a nerve and you've threatened something sacred to them, which money and power is all they care about, honestly. So we're challenging both those things. CHD is doing a great job. I am honored to be a part of this. And Polly, thank you for all you do.
Well, thank you to you, and thank you for all your advice. And there'll be more. We've got many more questions coming in for the unvaccinated community, so we'll have to do this again.
We will. Well, thank you everybody for watching. If you need some coaching from yours truly, Dr. Paul, or my partner, Dee Dee Hoover, kidsfirstforever.com is where you find me. I'm always grateful for your support and your attention. The new book, Vax Facts, is absolutely the book you want to give any new parent or somebody who's thinking about vaccines, because I share my whole journey. I didn't always start understanding what Polly's known for most of her life, that vaccines are a real problem. And but I do now. And that journey is one that I think you can take it quickly if you'll read Vax Facts and a few other books that are great, and stay plugged into the right sources of information. CHD TV is a incredible source. Become a subscriber of the daily online journal, The Defender, and I'll see you again next week right here at Pediatric Perspectives.
My name is Rose Cordes.
Okay, so Rose, let's go back, because these twins are your first babies.
Yes, correct. My first pregnancy.
Your first pregnancy. So when you were pregnant with these twin girls, did you have a conversation with any doctor or anybody about vaccination schedules or anything like that?
No, not with the pediatrician and not with my husband. We just were going to do what our parents did and our siblings.
And did you take any vaccinations while you were pregnant?
No, I did not. I was never offered them when I was pregnant back then.
So were they born okay?
Yeah, they were born at 36 weeks, 36.6, 5.14 and 5.6, born vaginally. No complications, went home in 24 hours. Beautiful, healthy 2 girls.
Wonderful. And so when did they get their first vaccination?
On October 19th of 2000.
How old were they then?
Just shy of 3 months old. But because they were born early at 36.6, they were much younger. And I didn't really realize that until later in life, that they were probably, 2.5 months old when they got their vaccines.
And you were very young as well.
I was young and didn't have the knowledge, didn't have the guidance.
So what were the twins like together?
You know what? being a mom of twins was probably the most incredible thing I've ever been through. It's such a joy to have two when they were identical. And I didn't know I was pregnant with twins until I was 6 months. So can you imagine 6 months and then to find out you were having two and both the same sex and they were identical? And Lauren, who was the one that passed away, she was so cute. She always stayed up. She cooed. It was almost like she knew she wasn't going to be here long. And she would sit with us on the couch and, just always be with us. Katie was a little more cranky, a little more needy, but together they were just amazing girls. I felt like they were thriving. They were healthy, no complications.
And is this what they had at that visit?
Yeah, they got.
So here, do you mind me showing the people?
Absolutely.
So there is the vaccination record, and people, there's usual DTaP here. Both the twins got the polio, the Hib, hepatitis B, and then of course, in my mind, one of the worst baby vaccines you can give, the Prevnar. They're all dangerous, but this one, nothing good comes from this one. So your babies had these each, and then talk us through what happened.
So that day that I took him to the pediatrician, I found out that, it was going to take longer because there was two, and we were the last ones in the pediatrician that day. And the doctor had talked to me about the vaccines. She actually handed me all these pamphlets and told me the worst thing is...
Okay, let's go through these for a bit with our people,
Yes.
because this is important. So this is before they had the shots, right?
All of them are in.
So, there's a thing on what is Hib? Oh, it's very dangerous. It's going to kill your child. When should you get it? Oh, you must get it at 2 months. So this is a young mother
24.
trusting the white coat profession, and this is the kind of propaganda they put in front. No mention.
None of them have death.
Yeah.
None of them have, and they say all that there would be a reaction within minutes or hours.
Okay,
Every
so all
single
of
paper.
polio. Yeah, and it just goes on and on and on and on and on. All of this. So this poor young mom gets bombarded with your child's going to die if it doesn't get these shots.
And then the Prevnar shot, she had asked me that it's not approved by insurance, but it is a cost of $95, and it would be $95 each. And I just told them I couldn't do that right now. I just came off maternity leave, and the doctor left the room and said, I'm going to do something real quick. And then the nurse came in and said, the doctor said that she's going to put it through insurance, and if something comes back, she's going to let them know it was a medical necessity because they were twins and born early. And as a young mom, and I was happy, I saved $190. If I only knew.
No.
And so as I had my brother with me, and we had to undress the little girls, and I'll never forget, because I was first time mom, when the nurses came in, they grabbed my one daughter, which was Lauren, and she just kind of slid her across the bed, and at the same time the nurses just went like that into her legs, and she started screaming, and I was overwhelmed, and then they finished the other couple shots, and then they squeezed her little fat, and then they injected her. But that was the different thing that they did to Lauren and they didn't do to Katie. And then they gave me Lauren. She couldn't calm down. I gave her to my brother. We got the other one vaccinated. We went home, and it was about maybe 3 miles away from our home. And by the time I got home, and that night, Lauren was cold to the touch. Katie wasn't, but Lauren was. And so the next day we had a church baby shower. They did it after the baby was born so all the women could enjoy the baby. And at that night, the pastor's wife said, somebody get this baby a blanket. She's freezing. And her body was so cold. And the next day I called the pediatrician because they were open on Saturdays just for ill babies. And I told them, hey, she's really cold to the touch. I mean, I don't know what's wrong with her. I had people concerned the night before, and they're saying, well, the temperatures have dropped. You need to bundle her better. Okay, first time mom, so I did that. Went to work on Monday, and that Monday was a very different Monday. The girls had a rough night. and we both woke up late. We were just getting out of that walking zombie stage, my husband and I, with two. And he woke up late, I woke up late. His job was more important to be on time. He got dressed, I got dressed. We started feeding the babies before we take him to the babysitter's house. He comes out, he went to go burp Lauren, and Lauren wouldn't burp. And he was on a time crunch, and he just laid her down and said, I gotta go. And my husband never left the house without saying goodbye and kissing all of us. And that day he did. I went to work, and I worked at an outside job, and it was raining that day, and I just couldn't get home for some reason. And I was always at the babysitter's between 12 and 12:30. She typically didn't have to put the babies down because of my work schedule. I got there at 3 o'clock that day. It was pouring rain. I knocked on the door. The babysitter came right to the door with Caitlin. She was crying. You could tell she was crying for a little while. She said she's been fussy since noon when we put the twins down, and she hands me her. And I start talking to Katie, and she calms down, and she goes, well, she hasn't finished her bottle. So she gave me her bottle. I started to feed her, talk to her. She calmed down, and she says, I'm going to go get the other twin. She's been sleeping all this time. And that's when the babysitter came out, and she was in a little pack and play. She slept with her sister in the pack and play, and I knew something was wrong. She used to sleep with her thumbs tucked in like this, and her hands were above her head like this, and you could tell her body was gray, like she was gone. And we laid her down, and she started CPR. The daughter called 911. I started CPR, and I don't know, I actually tossed Katie on the couch because I was feeding her and went down to do CPR, and I don't know what possessed me, but I left the house. I ran out and ran in the rain, and next door to me was my grandma, and I banged on her door and said, Lauren's dead, Lauren's dead. And Grandma came out, and I could hear the ambulance coming, so I started running back, and I just collapsed right there on the street. And it was like I was numb. I don't know if I was going crazy or what was happening. And all of a sudden this car was coming, and all I could see is these bright headlights coming right towards me, and I'm on my knees just crying, not knowing what was happening. And then all of a sudden I feel this arm touch me, and it was my neighbor. He came out, and how he knew, but he picked me up. We went to the house. Of course the paramedics came in, and right away they knew, because her body already had rigor mortis, they had just taken her straight into the ambulance. And my grandmother said, this is the mother, you need to take her. So I sat in that ambulance, and as I sat in there, I just saw my little girl on the left side, her thumb tucked in, and I just prayed, just open your hands for mommy. And her whole body just lifeless, just laying there. She never did. They threw me in a little room at Thunderbird Hospital that they had, where I stayed by myself until the doctor came in with a few nurses and asked me to sit down. And I told him I didn't want to sit down, and he sat down, and he told me he tried everything. And at that point I remember just cussing and being so hurt, and I know I even said words that I didn't even think I knew, but I was devastated, and I was alone. And one of the nurses said, I need somebody here with you. Who can I call? I said, my husband has a beeper. He's on his way home. You can't get a hold of him. I said, my parents live just a few blocks away. Call them. So when we called them, I talked, and then the nurse had to take over. And I love my dad, and my dad, I'm one of 12, but I always felt like Dad wasn't always there because he was always working to provide. And that day changed my life with my dad, because the way it felt was that nurse hung up that phone, and there's my dad in the doorway, and he held me, and he told me it was going to be okay, and he held me until my husband came. And then the hospital let us stay there until 9:30 that night, and this happened just shortly after 3 o'clock by the time we got there. And my family came to say goodbye to her. And the weird thing was, she had this smell that I'll never forget, and I'll talk about it a little later because it happened again. She had this smell to me, but when we held her, her body started to get warm, and the doctor said it's just because of our body heat. But if we tipped her too much, she would bleed out of her mouth and nose. So we couldn't tip her too high. So as we passed her along to all my family members, we had to be very careful. But they treated us so kindly there. And then they asked us to leave the room. And that's when I found out a detective was there. And he explained to us that he did a full investigation at the babysitter's house. He had to rule out foul play. And I was so hurt because she babysat for 25 years. That whole street I live on, we're family. When you say love thy neighbors, we literally love our neighbors. And I was offended that they would have thought she'd done something to the baby. And he just said that she's cleared, she's here. She would like to see the child if that's okay with you. And I said, yes, of course. But he said, I need to ask you a few questions for you and Jeff. And the first question he asked us was, she vaccinated in the last 72 hours. And that's what triggered my husband and I in 2000, is why would a detective ask us that if there was maybe a problem? And we didn't think vaccines at the time. So after leaving the hospital, I felt like the world just stopped. Like I just lost my baby, you know? And we went and spent the night at my parents' house. We couldn't go home that night. And the next day we took our other daughter to the pediatrician. And the pediatrician said it was just, there's no correlation. It was just a coincidence. And I told him at the hospital, they said that the girl should have came home with a apnea machine because they were born early. So she says, I can write you up one of those if you want. And we said, yes, we would feel comfortable. And we also said we want to do a VAERS report. Because the nurse was talking about it at the hospital if we were going to do one. And so the doctor did put a VAERS report in for our daughter, and Caitlin got a monitor. We went home. We buried Lauren on Saturday, and then on Monday my husband had to go to work, and a family friend stayed with us, and the apnea machine went off, and Katie pretty much flatlined. And thank God we were there. No pulse. We shook her, we tickled her. We did a little CPR. She was in and out. So we grabbed her and went straight to the pediatrician. I didn't think about going to the hospital. I thought I better go see the doctor. We went to the doctor and she sent us to Phoenix Children's right away. She was there for a whole week. We have all the documentation. She looked like an alien. She had wires everywhere. She had sleep studies. She had a CT scan. She had an MRI. I mean, they were testing her for everything. They could see that she had a true apnea. Well, they came back and they just told me that she had diagnosed with bradiocardiac, and they did an upper GI, and it obtained and revealed moderate esophageal reflux, and that she needed to go on 2 medications, Zantac and Reglan. And that was the solution for Caitlin, that the vaccines couldn't do this to her. So during our journey with Caitlin, we still vaccinated her, but we did one at a time because we were scared. And we went to the county, and my husband and I were on the verge of divorce. It was a lot for us. And I found out I was pregnant. And it was a tough time. It really was. And unfortunately, my husband took a little bit more to the bottle because it is a lot. You know, these pediatricians don't walk you through this. You're on your own after something like this. There is nobody. And they said it was SIDS. That's what the coroner called us and told us, that it was SIDS, that she, caused a death. And anyways, we started vaccinating Katie one at a time. And then I got pregnant with Kelly. And same thing happened to Kelly. Kelly was 4 years old, had every single vaccine that day. She had 4 at the county. And I can honestly tell you it was because Jeff and I were lazy. We were tired of going to the county to get these shots for the children. And we thought it didn't happen to Kelly, it happened to Lauren and Katie. So we went ahead and told the nurse, we'll take all 4. And the next day I went to work, and we had a 17-year-old babysitter because we gave the other babysitter off during the summer. And she called me and she said, Kelly's having a hard time breathing. And I said, well, Allie, I'm not there. What were you guys doing? And she says, we were playing outside, blah, blah, blah. And I said, listen, I'm going to be home soon. Put a movie in and I'll be home, and I'll look at her. Came home. There was nothing wrong with Kelly. Kelly was happy. She ate. She did everything. Next day, went to work. The minute I went to work, I just got out to the street and the babysitter called, and this time she's screaming and crying and frantic. And I said, Allie, you need to calm down. I said, what's going on? And she goes, Kelly can't breathe. And I said, Allie, listen, does she need medical attention? And she said, yes. I said, I know Uncle hasn't left next door. I'm going to call him, but I need you to hang up with me. But if she stops breathing, you need to give her CPR and you need to call 911. And she said, okay. My uncle came over. Now at this point, right, I have Caitlin, who's 4, Kelly, who's 4, Katie's 5, the oldest one, and then I have a 2.5-year-old. My uncle grabs all 3 kids, throws them in the car, no car seats, and rushes to Thunderbird Hospital, where Kelly was injected with steroids because her airway was closing. For 5 days, we had to take Kelly to get an injection so her airway would stay open. No one talked about it again. So we still separated all of our kids' shots. Then our son David, he was in the 6th grade. He received 2 shots, and it was about a month and a half before he had this episode. We were at the mall. He all of a sudden just collapsed, and he was gray. He had barely a pulse. I laid him down. The paramedics came to Arrowhead Mall. They started working on David, and then they sent out some code, got him on the gurney, and for the second time in my life, I sat in the ambulance looking at my son's left side of his body completely lifeless as they worked on him. And I thought, God, you can't take another one from me. And got to the hospital. They did the same thing, put me aside, worked on him, and then stabilized him and had my husband and I come in, and they said, well, David's stable. And we were there for hours, and they said he needs to go see a cardiologist. And so I called Phoenix Children's Hospital here, best in the valley, and got an appointment pretty quickly. And the cardiologist did all his tests for David as a sixth grader and came back and said, Mom, this is totally normal. Boys do this. It's their hormones. This is okay. And I had 7 brothers. None of my brothers did this. And he went by ambulance. His heart rate was in the 20s. How can you say this? And so David went on his way. David became a soccer athlete. And then this day I'll never forget again, September 7th, 2019, David had 1 shot on September 3rd. And he had a soccer game on September 7th. Went to his girlfriend's house in Chandler. They met us at 8 o'clock to have birthday cake, and I picked him up at Arizona Mills Mall. We were standing there across from each other at their cars. So there was my husband, my 1 daughter, Caitlin, that was the twin, his girlfriend's mom, the grandmother, and we were all just having a conversation. And David started to say he didn't feel good. And so he went to go sit down in the car, and the mom said, well, we were just watching a movie all day long. He's had plenty to drink. We ate. We didn't do anything except stay inside. And he sat down in the car, and then he came back. And now he's across from me. And he's 16 years old, a soccer player, strong kid. And we're all talking, and then all of a sudden the grandmother says, David, you don't look good. And he goes, I don't feel good. And then he just collapses right into my arms. And my husband helped me. And yes, Arizona's hot in September, but I knew the asphalt wasn't going to burn him, but it was warm. So we laid him down because he had the same symptoms he did when we were at Arizona, in the Arrowhead Mall. So we lay him down. Pulse is barely there, lethargic, gray tone, in and out. We call 911. The minute the paramedics got there, the first thing is, what kind of drugs does your son do? That's all their concern was. And we're like, my son doesn't do drugs. He's an athlete, So they kept working on David, doing EKG after EKG. Finally, they got him stable enough that the paramedics said, we're going to lift him up, put him in the car, and then we're going to reassess and come back with options for you guys. So my husband and I were with the group, and then the code comes out, the gurney comes out, and there goes David on this gurney, headed to the hospital. His heart was plummeting down. Everything was happening all over again. Went to the hospital. We were all there for hours.
They stabilized him. Sorry, he has to go home. He's stable. Okay, this is the second time. What's wrong with this kid? And they would not admit him. They told us again, go to the cardiologist, thinking, let's go to the same one. It happened before. He's got to figure it out. So the cardiologist did all his testing again. He came in the room and said the same thing to me. He said, Rose, I told you this is normal for boys. But then he had the guts to look at my son in his eyes and say, David, you're old enough now. When you get this feeling, I don't care where you are. If you're on a soccer field, you are in the mall, you lay down horizontal on that ground and let that blood flow from your head to your feet. And I thought, I'm done. There is no explaining what happened to David. So David never got any more shots. He's at college in California as a D1 athlete, and COVID happened, and we had to tell him, David, at this point, it's just money. We'll figure out how to get you out of there and you come home, but you cannot get it. And they honored it to that point, and he never got the shot, but he had to follow all the protocols. If a boy came with, COVID, David was the one that had to be quarantined too, because there was protocols, because he wasn't vaccinated. And it just broke my heart that, during this journey, the doctors, the pediatricians, Big Pharma, you give these children these ingredients that I spend the time looking at appliances, looking at the box of food and seeing what's in it, but I never took the time to see what they were injecting into my children. And, to lose one child and then to have 3 other potential, and to keep thinking it can't be the vaccines, it's got to be our DNA. And then my sister during COVID, that's when I woke up. In 2019, she got Ty and Charlene Bollinger's The Truth About Vaccines, and my husband and I watched every video. And we knew in our heart the whole time, but when you go, you're gonna hurt other children. This child's gonna die. My son got HPV because, you don't want him to get oral cancer, do you? I mean, the fear tactics they use to you, and as a parent, all you want to do is keep these children safe and protect them. And I always thought I was doing the right thing. The good news is, because of our story, and because I have spoken out to other moms, it's impacting my grandchildren. And that's the hope I have for the next generation, that it has made a difference. My grandchild is not vaccinated, has had nothing, had a natural birth in a birthing center, no eye cream, no Hep B, no vitamin K, no epidural, there was nothing. And she's 10 months old, and her doctor said to my daughter, Kelly Rose, if you're looking at textbook, don't look at textbooks. Anna Rose has surpassed this. I mean, the healthiness, and I don't want to compare my kids to others, but to watch my grandchild and then watch other people's children about the same age, there is a big difference. There's a huge difference, and God's children are not meant to be harmed. And I do feel in this society that when you don't, you're the one that looks like the bad person. You're the one that's crazy or, mental. And I just feel that we're a real family, and 4 out of 4 children, you explain it to me and you do the timeline, and it all links back to the vaccines. So.
You're going to can we show the picture?
Yeah.
I'm going to put the picture.
That actually was Friday before she passed away. That was at the baby shower. And you know what? I felt like we had time, and we never got a family picture with the twins.
You haven't?
We thought we had time.
Take your picture. We can take a picture.
Oh, no. That's for you guys.
Okay. Well,
No. I mean, like my husband and I with the girls.
Right prominent there, so she's in every single shot.
Yeah.
Thank you for the story.
Yeah. There's hope. I mean, with all of us speaking out, and it was real when I came and I saw all those names. I'm not alone.
On the bus.
Yeah.
No, you're not.
No. We could change. We can change the future. I know we can.
We have to.
We have to.